How do we overcome the traumas we experience in our lives? Today, we're going to talk about that and more with the wonderful Rachel Vaughan. Stay tuned.
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Welcome to another show, Accentuating the Positive with Karen Swain. Always a blessing to be with you all again. And today is going to be a fascinating show. I so look forward to hearing Rachel's story. We are streaming on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network on 107.7 and 105.3 FM, syndicated radio across the US and Canada. Also, we're streaming on about 8 different platforms over the internet: YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, and Twitch. Well, how do we overcome the traumas that we live in our lives? You know, recently I watched on a streaming platform, not giving any plugs or anything, but that show called Mad Men, about the advertising men in the 60s, well, basically over the decade of the 60s, and all the dysfunctional families and how everybody just smoked and drank and had a lot of sex to overcome their traumas. I mean, is that the way to overcome trauma? Just try and stuff it down with sex or eating or smoking or taking drugs? I don't think so. I think there's a better way, and we're going to find out today with Rachel. I'll bring Rachel up. Welcome to the show, Rachel. So great to have you on the show.
Hello, Karen. Thank you for having me.
And of course, Rachel is an Australian, another Aussie, and she's in Adelaide. And Adelaide, for those people listening in the States, is actually on the south coast of Australia. And it was where my mother was born. Her parents were English and they came out to Australia and landed in Adelaide. And Mum was from Adelaide, the beautiful Adelaide, which has a gorgeous coastline and also hills, right?
It does, yeah. I mean, it's beautifully located. It's got some dark history.
Well,
I mean, it's not somewhere I like to spend a lot of time in.
We're going to find out about Australia's dark history. I know Australia is a beautiful country, but it does have some dark history. We're such a small population, but we do have some dark history. You hear about these sorts of things happening. Television dramas are made about them in the States or maybe even in Europe. And you think that Australia is this lucky country, and it is, and everybody's happy and rosy, but dysfunction happens all over the world. It doesn't matter how beautiful a landscape you live in. I find personally that some of the most beautiful parts of the world have some of the most traumatic, family experiences. I don't know, like, is beauty not enough for people? Like, surrounded by natural beauty, they have to sort of hate and fight and kill each other. I don't get it. But let me tell you a little bit about what Rachel has been through. So Rachel Vaughan is a psychic medium with 21 years of professional reading experience, as well as a lifetime of interaction with the spirit world. She also shows people how to identify earth energies such as ley lines and portals. After growing up in a cult called the Family and experiencing some of the worst traumatic abuse as a child, from ritual abuse to mind control programming, today Rachel is an eternal optimist who maintains we are all immortal souls having a human experience, and we all can attain inner peace and success despite our traumas. A whistleblower, researcher, and public speaker, over the past 4 years, Rachel has become acutely aware of a large part of humanity experiencing spiritual ascension. During this process, many incarnate souls have come to understand the depth of depravity and control of those who have held positions of power on earth. Rachel has spent the past 18 years on a healing journey, starting when she recognized she chose her father from her soul's perspective and thus agreed to the experiences she would encounter while here on earth. She's also spent 18 years asking the Australian authorities to investigate the cult that abused her as a child in the 70s and the 80s. She passionately believes that the current ascension process of Earth, fueled by humanity's collective spiritual awakening, can facilitate a change from the current control system into something that we will be proud to pass on to our children and grandchildren. And Rachel is one of the speakers at the Cosmic Consciousness Conference, which happens at Uluru this December, from Friday the 20th to Sunday the 22nd of September, so just before Christmas. Maybe if you want to go to Australia, you thought about coming to Australia, or you're in the Northern Hemisphere and you want a really hot Christmas in the desert, come on down. You want to go from a white Christmas to a stinking hot Christmas in the desert? Come on down. There's a link under this show and a promo. If you put in the promo code Karen, all capitals, you can get a $50 discount. But Mick and Catherine are going to come on the show in a couple of weeks and tell us all about the conference. They've been putting on conferences for about 10 years now. Obviously, during 2020 and 21 and even 22, they had to stop because they were all closed down, but they started up again. And so you'll be speaking. I was just talking to Rachel. Is this her first time speaking in front of a live crowd?
Yeah, so it's not my first time. So I did that in 2020 on the steps of Parliament in Adelaide to a crowd of people. That was the Worldwide March for Children. So this will be, and I've done some other public speaking in front of a live crowd. So I'm hoping I'm going to be okay. I'm sure I'll be fine. There's some beautiful speakers that are coming along, so I'm very excited. I've already met Robert Jameson. We met a couple of weeks ago. He's a lovely man. Very similar sort of fascination with ley lines and alignments and the amazing pareidolia, I use that in inverted commas, way that nature can communicate with us using humanoid features or animal features in the landscape. So Robert obviously has an interest in that as well, which is really cool. Yeah, so I'm really excited about that. I went to Uluru in 2000 and actually I did climb the rock. You can't do that now, and I totally agree with the fact that it's a sacred space and probably shouldn't be trampled on by tourists. But it was a profound experience to go up there and actually walk the rock at the time. I was actually very apprehensive looking at this massive rock, and it wasn't until I saw it, I was really nervous that I was going to hurt myself. It was weird. And I saw this little old lady walking down it, and I thought, oh, for heaven's sake, get up there and feel the experience. And being up there, there was this eerie silence that I can't describe. It wasn't just an absence of sound. It was like being in a different dimension. Wow. It was really amazing. There were about 20 odd people that went up that I didn't know. I went up. My friend didn't want to go up because he was being considerate of, because even at that point in 2000, we knew that the original people didn't want tourists up there. Yeah. I just felt compelled, even though I was frightened. I felt compelled to go up. I'm glad I did. I wouldn't go up again. But the silence was amazing. It was just this absolute clarity. That would be a way to describe it. Everybody that was up there with me didn't speak either. There was no bird noise, nothing. So wow. I've since learned that this beautiful big rock is actually in the crossing point of two dragon lines, which for those who are interested in ley lines, they would understand that dragon lines are the most powerful of the ley lines. Oh. And so for that rock to be in the crossing point of two dragon lines and to be able, to actually be invited up to Uluru, this is the uncanny thing about synchronicity. I wanted to go to Uluru in June of this year, but it didn't work out. And I realised it was such a long distance to drive. And so I pulled out. And then I was invited up this December. And then I found out that it's actually, we're coming into permanent harmony time of the ley lines at the end of this year in December, literally at the same time that Catherine's putting on this conference. This is a magnificently important event for the ley lines to permanently harmonise. So normally ley lines will harmonise, and dragon lines included, on the equinoxes and solstices. But we're coming into permanent harmony time. And so when I heard about this, it finally occurred to me, because I had heard about us going into 5D. I felt that we were going into it, but I just didn't understand how it was possible. Ley lines, dragon lines, are fifth dimensional, in my opinion. So I work as a medium, and I've worked with spirit guides ever since I was a small child, and that's part of the reason why I survived my difficult childhood. And my understanding from them was that we were coming into 5D. I just, even as a medium, you still question the stuff that comes through at times because you're having a human experience and you can be skeptical. But when I heard that we're coming into this permanent harmony time, it just, I don't know, it just joined so many dots. So yeah, to be able to be up at Uluru at that time is just, yeah, I can't explain enough how excited I am and how honoured, and the lineup of people speaking is spectacular. So it's going to be very exciting. I'm really looking forward to it.
I have to say, I think Mick and Catherine gather some gorgeous people, not just the speakers, but the people that come to the conference. It's so lovely to meet people from all over the world that come to these conferences. I mean, that's the whole point of putting on physical conferences. It's a huge amount of work. I'm involved. I've been involved in it for many years and involved in another one next year. And yeah, it's a huge amount of work to get people to come along, get people to put their money behind it and organize it. But it's so worth it, honestly. Coming together physically like that and meeting people and hearing people's stories, not just the speakers, but the people that come together and finding that connection and being a part of activating the ley lines, as you say, and the ascension of Earth. Jesus would say, or Sananda would say, where two or more are gathered in my name being love or joy or ascension or bliss or peace or whatever name you want to give it, all the same name. Yeah, there is this incredible power when we come together, both consciously and physically. So it'll be beautiful. But let's get into a little bit of your story. I don't think we're going to go too much into the gory details, because I think that you've probably shared the gory details on other shows, and we're not going to do this on this show many times. Yeah. So if people really want to hear about the gory details, go listen to another show. We'll just go over it. But what I'm fascinated about is here you are in a cult situation as a child, and you're experiencing both physical, mental, and emotional abuse, and you are wide open, empathic, starseed, wanderer, whatever you want to call it. How did you cope with that as such a sensitive, open, psychic child?
So inherently, as a personality, I'm incredibly stubborn, and I'm not very good person to try and squash. I'm not squashable. Unbroken is the word. So I had, just to give a little bit of a breakdown, I grew up in Adelaide in the 70s and 80s, and my experiences were that my father was an ASIO operative, which is MI6 or Mossad, or it's the Australian version of spy. He worked for a telecommunications company as a wiretapper. So that was his day job, and that's what he would describe to people. That's what he did. He was a wiretapper, which means he listened into people's conversations. So, he was a spy on the outside and a spy behind the scenes as well. He had a very large group of pedophile friends. He trafficked all of his children to those friends. 3 of his very close friends are now convicted pedophiles. I have just recently been acknowledged by the government after 18 years of efforts, over 70 interviews, countless statutory declarations, interviews with police. It's only after I published all of the physical evidence, the undeniable physical evidence of the tunnels that I was trafficked through that supposedly don't exist, but I've proven the existence of them. 3 different kinds in the Edwardstown area where I grew up. So there were the walkable water tunnels, the telecommunications tunnels, which are under every main street and every main road in Australia. You just got to look at the footpath of the road and see the metal plates, and you'll find a telecommunications tunnel. And most of the ones on the main streets and main roads are walkable. And also there were the 1938 mandated tunnels that were built or dug under a mandate prior to World War II, where every business place, meeting place and home had to have a tunnel, trench or bunker within 20 feet of the back door. So when you think about that, we've got a continent that's absolutely, the cities are absolutely covered in tunnels. So my experiences as a child, just to put it in a nutshell, I was trafficked through tunnels as a honeypot. So I was used in footage and photographs to blackmail people that my father and his cronies wanted to have control over. I was also used in child rape material and ritual abuse as well, which was pretty intense. I witnessed the unaliving of many. I was taken out many times, probably best way to use the terminology. But on all of those occasions when, attempts were made to get rid of me, I bounced back. So either I was too much of an asset for them to actually do it properly, which is very much likely, or in my experience, I would go to the other side, to what I would describe as the recovery dimension, and then my guides would explain to me I had to go back. There was other stuff I had to do. And each time I was reticent, but they would make me. And obviously I must have agreed to it to some degree. But it was that connection with the spirit guides that I had, and my spirituality, and believing in Jesus and God, and that I could win. I could fight and win if I just kept at it. So I've recently been acknowledged by the South Australian government for the abuse that my father perpetrated against me, and awarded a victim of crime payment. And it's only a very small payment. It wasn't really, it's nothing special, but that's the first acknowledgement from the government that this happened to me. My father was investigated, by the way, in 2016, but he died in 2017, and they stopped investigating.
He died. We'll go into that too. But so when you say recently acknowledged, how recently? Like very recently?
Very recently, in the last couple of months.
On the last couple of months. Oh, right. Because I know that you were fighting for some acknowledgement from the Australian government or the authorities. Did that help? Like, does that really help to sort of have that recognition from the government that, they acknowledge that this happened? And it does when you stop it.
Because I wasn't going to stop until it happened. And it certainly wasn't about the money. It was about, and it was a very small amount of money, but it was about knowing that they had to acknowledge it. And they had to acknowledge it because I had medical backup for the permanent injuries that were caused to my physical body. I had, statutory declarations from others to state that these things happened. I had 2 siblings that had similar abuses, and 3 convicted pedophiles that were my father's really good friends. I mean, they just couldn't ignore it any longer. Plus, I put out 3 particular videos, bodies with all of the evidence, photographic evidence linking our father, to the Beaumont children, to Richard Kelvin, who was one of the family murder victims, Louise Bell, who I saw murdered, unalived. So all of that evidence came out in late 2023, early 2024. I put that out. Then I was in Jeanette Archer's SRA conference in July, and I exposed even more. So the more I go at it, obviously I assume that they must have just realised that I was just never going to stop to give me some sort of acknowledgement, in the hope that I might shut up, which I won't ever do, not while children are still being abused. And, unfortunately, this country of ours is the state-sanctioned child trafficking is the worst aspect now. A lot of what was going on when I was a child was underground, literally. It's now overt, and it's the Department of Child Protection that's doing it.
Wow.
And that's something that I want to shut up about.
So exposing it and having acknowledgement, do you think that that's a way of stopping it, by having it exposed? If it's covert and if it's secret, it can continue. But if it's not secret and it's acknowledged, then it stops. So has that acknowledgement stopped any of it?
It certainly seems to have armed people to then go and support those that are having these experiences. So with the children that are being taken now under the state-sanctioned operations, people just assume, oh, well, they must be a terrible parent, which is so debilitating to these poor people. And a lot of the time what happens is that they lose their child because there's a pedophile in the family and they've made an allegation against them. And so then the custody is taken from the protective parent to the abuser. So what I've found is that there's so many people now standing up about this. Books are being written, names are being published. And that means that the suppression orders are being exposed. The judges who are actually sitting on these family court boards or, in various positions, and the children's lawyers are a big problem. And all of the experts that speak up, they get $10,000 per court appearance to say whatever they're paid to say. whether, you know, and it's obviously never in the favor of the protective parent. So people are realizing this now, all over the place. They realize, you know, and it's not just in Australia, it's all over the world that this is happening. So the more exposure, the less capable they are of hiding it. And under natural law, no one has a right to anybody's children. The parent is the person that has the power over that child. It's their legal right under real law, LORE. So people just need to be, they need to have the foreknowledge and to be forearmed to know what their rights are.
But sometimes the parent is the perpetrator. Like your father was your real father. He wasn't an adopted father. He didn't steal you or anything.
No,
he was the perpetrator. So he has control and rights over you. But and you say that authorities that are sort of put in place to stop abuse in families are often facilitating it.
Exactly. Yeah. So they'll find out that there's an abusive parent, usually because the other parent makes an allegation. This is before perhaps the abusive parent is part of a cult or part of a Freemason order or anything like that. And then the authorities will get hold of that person, the abuser, and promise them that if they allow them to keep custody of the child, they will have access to the child themselves. And this is how the children then get into the trafficking system.
Yeah. Hi, Diane. She says, hi, Rachel and Karen. Interesting topic. It is an interesting topic. It's a hard topic to discuss. It's a very hard topic because it's traumatic. And as I say, Rachel shared the trauma that she went through on many other podcasts. And if you really want to know, you know, if you want the gory details, go to those. But really what I'm interested in is, because we all go through some sort of trauma. I mean, it's not to compare anybody's trauma, but trauma is trauma is trauma is trauma. And then we grow up and try to deal with it. And interestingly enough, you know, we were talking about the word success. Some people are really successful because of their trauma, and they use their prowess in making money or their talent in making, you know, being fabulous to overcome. And they just use it to suppress their trauma. And then they get all the money they want and all the fame they want and all the success they want. And they're still miserable or suppressed or depressed. You hear that in movie stars and rock stars and singers and stuff like that. You know, the Lady Gagas and the Madonnas of the world, they're some of the most famous, talented, creative people. And then they come out and they say they've been on a slew of pills for 10 years because they're chronically depressed. And that is because they haven't overcome, you know, the ideas that they formulated through their childhood, you know, dysfunction. They've just stuffed it down. So you being a psychic, empathic child and having the ability to have your spiritual team on tap actually saved you, like helped you rather. Yeah, it helped you. Tell us more about that.
Well, I was able to read auras from an early age, and this is something that was exploited by my father's cult as well. And I could remote view into other things as well. So that was part of the reason why I was focused on in the family, was because he was using, or the cult was using, my abilities. But the flip side of that was that I could read the auras of the people that were coming towards me, say in a cult situation, and I would be able to recognize who was actually genuinely enjoying the abusing, who was doing it just because they'd been told to do it. And that helped me to understand human psychology, I suppose, to a degree, or the soul reasons for why people do things. So that in itself kept me going as well, because when you're a dissociative child and you're being abused, you can observe. And so I learnt a great deal. The times when I was sort of having out-of-body experiences and watching these things going on, I was learning about, you know, why people do these things. Most people who abuse have been severely traumatized themselves. Narcissism can be a result of trauma. So when you look at it from that point of view, you know, I recognize that a lot of these people that were abusing me as a child were themselves children. You know, even less evolved than me as a small child. I mean, you know, some of my abuses began, some of my earliest memories are of abuse, you know, as a toddler. So I suppose I was able to see a higher perspective because I had that assistance, and Yeah, it's certainly an interesting way to grow up. It's interesting what you're saying before about all these famous people that, you know, they have all the money in the world, all the supposed success in the world, a great deal of talent. But a lot of those people have been through very similar situations as me, because I was under the MKUltra program also. So when you've got your MKUltra people that are famous, you know, they are slaves. They don't
Yeah.
enjoy it. They're literally
Yeah.
slaves. And it is very sad. A lot of people do self-medicate. You see a lot of alcoholism, a lot of drug taking. There's, you know, heroin addicts in my family, multiple, and a lot of people, you know, smoking pot and drinking and doing all the things that, you know, that block out those memories. I drink coffee. That's all I've got.
That's your vice.
That's all I've got. As you get to, you know, to open up spiritually, you find that things like alcohol and pharmaceutical preparations, even, I can't bear anymore. They just make me feel so unwell. So that's part of the ascension process that I've noticed also with clients, is that as I watch these, you know, amazing clients that I have get to higher and higher frequencies on a soul level, they can't drink alcohol. They can't take these, you know, medical preparations. I wouldn't call them medicines. They can't eat wheat. Australian wheat is so genetically modified, it's inedible for most people at a really high soul frequency. So they'll have, you know, leaky gut syndrome from the wheat, or they'll have all sorts of problems with eating wheat. And some lactose intolerance. You can also get so sensitive with these higher frequencies that you end up, you know, I can't walk down the washing aisle in the supermarket without feeling a little bit unwell because of the very strong perfumes that they use. So even that, you can get quite sensitive to those sorts of things. Nitrites, sulfur, those sorts of things as well. So for those who are going through these interesting soul upgrades or DNA upgrades at the moment, and it's on steroids at the moment, even more so than, you know, I've been talking about this for a while, but it's really ramping up. So humanity seems to be getting pushed and pulled into higher and higher frequencies at the moment. So your sensitivities will go up. You may have trouble sleeping. You might also have skin conditions that just pop up out of nowhere. That's all part of the ascension process. Tiredness. So give yourself, you know, be kind to yourself, get out in nature as much as you can if you're going through that process, because a lot of us are going through it at the moment. And again, I think, from my understanding, it's because we're coming up to this permanent harmony time. It's like we're all trying to get to a certain frequency as quickly as possible before that happens. It seems, it makes sense to me. It's not that I'm saying we're not going to be ascending still after that period, but I think it's a bit like when you manage to convince your parents. I believe very much in reincarnation. If you manage to convince your parents to call you your soul name, the name that you have on the other side, in your current physical incarnation, that, you know, you get a lot of accolades on the other side. I think in a similar way, those of us who are getting to a really high frequency before the permanent harmony time will also, you know, enjoy some sort of reward, or, you know, just feel chuffed, happy with ourselves because we've done it. Yeah. So I've been absolutely amazed at the shift in frequency that I've seen in clients and friends and, you know, family in the last 4 years. It's been intense. I imagine you would have experienced similar. You would have seen people going up levels.
I think it's intense no matter what part of life we're in, because it's just intense in general. But there's definitely an acceleration of people shifting and recognizing that it's not okay to live with your negative belief systems and your trauma. And like so many lives, like I said before, so many lives are lived with this trying to suppress it and just feeling depressed and disconnected and trying to find that connection through the material world, like from the fame or the success or the money or the lover or the next lover. If somebody loves me, then I'll feel loved. If I'm successful, then I'll feel appreciated. And I think that what's happening on planet Earth is that's not the story anymore. People are seeking inner peace and inner wisdom rather than outer success. Look, the greater majority of the population of the world is still seeking that. Just look at the world. Just look at universities, all those kids suffering to sort of get the best marks and be the most successful. But yeah, there's a huge amount of people, like you said in the bio, waking up to that's not the end game. There's another game. Yeah. So, Your father was obviously not a very nice person, and he died in 2017. Did you come to, like it says in the bio, that you realized that you chose him before you came here? Did you, while being here in this physical, did you find love and forgiveness for him?
I did manage to forgive him a few years ago. So I didn't come to that realization until around about 2012, 2013, around that time. But that was absolutely pivotal to me healing, because prior to that, I was a shocking victim, just a victim. Like everything was just against me. It was everybody else's fault. The authorities wouldn't listen, and I was also besides myself, because there were still members of my family, young members of my family, that were being exposed to my father and his friends. And no one in the family was listening, apart from my two siblings who've also spoken out, and a few others. But I just felt completely overwhelmed with powerlessness. And when I actually recognized that I had chosen him for a purpose, and that purpose was something that I was going to be doing, which I'm doing now, it turned it around. I wasn't powerless anymore. I'd actually chosen this for a reason, and I was completely empowered by that. And that's where the healing began. Because prior, I was in so much physical pain that I could barely walk.
Wow.
So, and it's interesting, I have a sibling who also suffered from multiple sclerosis symptoms and had a spontaneous healing. And she also could barely walk at one point, was in a wheelchair. So I think that was part of the programming under the MK program, to never remember. So as my memories were starting to come out, I started to get sicker and sicker and sicker. And yeah, I was shaking. It was really full on. So yeah, the healing started around 2012, 2013. And so I forgave my father, I think it was 1 or 2 years ago. I've forgotten the actual date. And I actually posted about that, because it was profoundly healing again. Because when you have hatred and you're bitter and you are vengeful, and I even though he was dead, I was still so angry at what he had done.
Yeah.
When you release that, it's not about saying that what they've done is okay. It's got nothing to do with that. And people get very caught up in that. It has nothing to do with forgiving them their trespasses. What it means is that you're saying, you did that. It's not affecting me anymore. I'm healed from it. I'm releasing all of the anger and the karmic contracts, like the karmic attachments. So I released all of that in that forgiveness process. And it doesn't mean that I don't have days where I still think, or I might say, scum of the earth, because of course he was, but he was very traumatized and had alters. And, he wasn't really just one individual. He had many different parts, and different parts would come out at different times. What it does is it just releases you from having any kind of connection energetically also with that individual or that soul, because people don't seem to realize energetically we have cords that connect us with those people that have the greatest significance in our lives, whether they are people we love or we hate. And the more we think about them, the more energy exchange there is between those energetic cords.
Absolutely.
So if you can forgive somebody, you can release that. And
Absolutely.
It's actually, it's complicated releasing from parents and children. That cord that's the most complicated cord to release.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe I've released it. Yeah.
Absolutely. The more you think about somebody, absolutely, the more energy you're giving that story. I remember a girlfriend of mine had an abusive ex-husband, and she was seeing a therapist, and she said to me once something that the therapist said to her, which I thought was classic. She said, all the time that you spend hating him he is occupying space in your head, and he's not paying rent. That was hilarious. He's occupying space in your head, and he's not paying rent. Oh, absolutely. I remember, I had a story with my ex-husband, because he just didn't pay any maintenance and just wouldn't. And I would be right in my complaint about how he should, and it's his responsibility, and we came in this together, and rah, 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 the big story I have, like, we can be right, and we can have everyone agree with us how we are right, but it doesn't help us heal. And I remember listening to Abraham Hicks, the channelings of Abraham Hicks, and Esther saying, Abraham saying, or the stream of consciousness that calls himself Abraham saying, you are the vortex through which your abundance comes. No one else is the vortex through which you're abundant. And I had this aha moment, like I am demanding that he give me money because he needs to take responsibility and yada, but I am the vortex through which abundance comes. So as I hold on to my hatred of him, wasn't really hatred as much as disappointment, like intense disappointment of him, and righteousness, how he should behave differently, I'm actually closing that vortex through which abundance can flow, and through which joy can flow, and life can throw, and energy and power and health can flow. And I thought, whoa, I'm just killing myself here with this story. I can be right about it, but I'm just killing myself. And I remember letting go, and he came over to drop off my daughter. And I sat him down and I said, you're off the hook. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, you know, like whether you pay me maintenance or you don't pay me maintenance, whether you want to contemplate your navel for the rest of your life, do what you like, you're off the hook. I am the vortex through which I proclaimed, I am the vortex through which my abundance flows. And he made all sorts of promises, which he always did. Oh, no, I'll get you the money. I'll get you the money. I'll get you the money. And I just let go. And he left the house. Seriously, I felt like I was levitating. I felt like I was floating. Like when you let go of that angst, how light, you know, we talk about enlightenment, how light I felt. How light I felt, letting go of that story that was weighing me down. Yeah, that's true healing, huh? But as I say, my story is nothing compared to your story. How traumatic does the story have to be until you just let it go? Yeah.
I like what you said before, though. Trauma is trauma. So people often say that to me, and I know people who've had way worse trauma than me. So it's relative. Just because somebody else has suffered something more, just because we live in a first world country and other people live in third world countries, it doesn't mean that we don't experience the trauma. And this is the sad thing about living in a dualistic existence on Earth. We learn a lot more from our traumas, unfortunately. And I'm certainly not advocating. And I really hope there's a time, and I believe there will be, where we don't have to go through the trauma to learn our lessons. But, you know, it's I embrace what I have learned, not the way that I learned it, but I've embraced what I've learned, because that's what's made me who I am. And I'm not ashamed of who I am, that's for sure, despite, you know, the horrible things that happened. And there's this other thing that I speak about quite a bit in interviews. You know, my body, every cell in the body is replaced every 10 years. So this physical body that I have hasn't been violated, because every cell's been replaced since, you know, since the last time I was used.
I actually think it's every 2 years. Isn't it every 2 years? Every cell is replaced?
Well, many cells are replaced, but there's some cells that, you know, are more, take longer. So over a 10-year period, everything's replaced.
Everything's, because you're literally not wearing the same body that endured the abuse. Yeah, you're wearing a different body completely. I know, it's amazing. It's amazing. And yeah, people say if every cell is replaced, how come you still have the scars on your physical body? It's an interesting concept, isn't it? If you like change your idea of what you look at, or what you look like, you can change scars and your physical body. I've spoken to many people who've changed the way they think, and their physical body has literally changed. They had big hips and then they had little hips, or, you know, like their whole body structure changed when they changed the way they thought about themselves and life in general. Yeah. It's really interesting. Yeah.
I've actually had the experience of going up in soul frequency, and actually moles have dropped off, which is just bizarre.
Wow. That's interesting. That's really interesting, because I'm moly. I got moles. And I often think about the moles, like, and the moles, like, what are the moles? I feel like the moles are sort of like a mark that is significant with past life stuff.
Definitely.
Like, yeah.
Totally agree with that. Birthmarks and things,
marks.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. And moles.
You can look into past lives and see, you know, did something intrude into the body at that time, or was that a sign of an injury, or a pox or something that might have been, affecting the body at that time.
Exactly. And maybe it's a mark in this physical life that you're still learning from that experience, and it's just like a physical mark on your body. I remember years ago when I was a young naturopathic student, I've got these 3 little moles at the top of my shoulder here. and they're in the shape of a triangle. And my chiropractor or osteopath said to me, "Oh, the mark of a triangle. You've got the mark of a triangle on you." And I'm like, "Okay, what does that mean?" And he says, "It means you're a white witch." And to the young 20-something-year-old, I mean, that meant a lot to me. I'm like, "Am I? Am I a white witch?" Yeah. Like the healers, the white witches were the
Yeah,
healers.
yeah, absolutely.
So I
Yeah,
told all my
it's like
friends, and everyone's looking for
the
triangles
old,
on their body. Where's my triangle?
the old widow's peak. I don't know if you've got one as well, but yeah, you end
I
up
don't
with
think I do.
a little bit.
What does the
But
widow's
yeah,
peak
that
mean?
was well. Apparently, it's specific bloodlines. So I'm from the Kennedy bloodline. So that's one of the 13 bloodlines that I can't use the prefaces for that on this particular platform, but like an SRA bloodline. Yeah, along with
Okay.
Rh negative blood and some of the inbreeding causes things like cystic fibrosis. If you've got a bloodline with cystic fibrosis or muscular dystrophy in it, and there's some other really interesting ones, hemophilia, that can be a sign of a bloodline family.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I think that you talk about understanding yourself as an immortal soul and choosing your life experience. I think that a soul that is choosing a life experience as you have is like a brave soul. It must be a very evolved soul. The more trauma you choose to have on earth, I think the more evolved you must be in order to overcome it, right? So what do you think your soul mission is here on earth, having chosen the life that you did?
Well, to protect children. So, and I've tried very hard to protect the ones in my family. Unfortunately, I don't think I was terribly successful at that. But at least if those children were abused during the time that I was making all of this noise, and my two siblings were making all this noise about the people in my father's cult that were, very dangerous, they will have recourse to come back at the government and say, "Hey, why didn't you do anything to protect us?" And also to speak up about, like I said, Child Protective Services not being protective. But at the moment, I feel my main mission at the moment is to help people to understand the importance and significance of the ley lines, that this harmonisation period that this permanent harmony time that we're coming up to in December is so significant and important. And we can actually go out and part of the reason why I'm so interested in ley lines and where they cross these portal or vortex spaces is because as a child, I was taken to rituals in those spaces. And I now have an understanding of why they did the things that they did in those spaces. It was to call up entities. A death creates an opening, a doorway between dimensions. So what happens then is that they would do what they do in that space, which is not very pleasant. It would make darker things come to the doorways that would want to come and steal the loose energy. And then as the unalived left, they would invert the doorways to bring in entities. And this is what people all over the world who are in very high positions do to get power. They attach themselves to something very dark. Dark entities can speak to people in the audible channels. They get very clear channelings, very clear information about the future. So unlike yourself and myself, where a lot of that is, well, with me, it's all visual. I don't get any kind of sound because I shut that down in childhood because I was used in these situations. So my understanding now is that if we can balance out the really negative frequencies that are placed into these really important portal spaces, bearing in mind every single church is sighted on a ley line. Every single church is sighted on a ley line. A Freemason goes along with a sighting rod and sights that church on a ley line. So every church is in a crossing point, as is every arena. And a lot of the arenas around the world, you look at them, they look like eyes, like a single eye for a reason. Every abattoir, every court, every Freemasonic lodge, every hospital, every hospice, every place where if you imagine there's really intense emotions experienced in that place, unless it's joy. Yeah. The joy ones are not placed in those crossings. So my mission now is to help people to go out and actually experience joy, love for the earth, sing, vocalize, play beautiful 432 hertz, 528 hertz music within the lays and the lay crossings. And I've learned to actually see the ley lines, or my guide showed me. So I'm teaching people how to actually find them visually. So we have these CRY2 cryptochromes, flavoprotein light receptors, magnetoreceptors in the human retina, just like birds and insects do. And we know that they navigate using ley lines. We can see them as well. This is a scientific fact. If you look up Natural Library of Medicines on cryptochromes, you'll find the articles. You'll also find that this poor man called Robin Baker, who's been trying to prove this, or has proven it, absolutely undeniable proof, has been academically trolled for daring to speak up about this and absolutely hammered. So, but this is a fact. You can't troll away the fact that we have these cryptochromes. So if we can see the ley lines, people can get a bit daunted by it. If they have to learn to dowse, using dowsing rods to find a ley, they might not necessarily do it because it might seem too out of their comfort zone or too difficult, or they don't want to be seen walking around with these rods and get laughed at. But if you can see them, which you can, if you just learn some very basic techniques, you can go out and find a ley line. You can meditate in the line. You can put in joy, ask for freedom and balancing, play these beautiful music, sing, bring joy into the lays to balance out these negative frequencies that have been poured into them for millennia.
Yeah.
I mean, the pagans were doing terrible things in the lays for millennia. The churches in England were placed on the ritual stones, were used as their foundation stone with the churches. So,
yeah, humans in general have been doing terrible things for millennia. But I don't know too much about ley lines because it's not really the work I do. So I was asking my guides, tell me about the ley lines. And what they're showing me is that where the energy vortices, where the energy meridians, lines cross, it creates a vortex. And whatever energy is inside that vortex is amplified. So so if you're evoking negative energies, then you're amplifying it. Or if you're evoking positive energies, then you're amplifying it. So it's an amplification point. And I'm like, that makes sense. Okay. So as you say, if there have been ritual abuse or, like abuse rituals happening in these places, whether it be churches or town halls or out in nature on these ley line or these where they cross, then you can change the energy by going to that same place and just putting different energy in there, putting laughter and joy and love and connection, and which is what you guys are all going to be doing out there in Uluru at Christmas time, right? That's exactly what you're going to be doing.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%.
Loving each other.
Yeah. I've co-founded a movement called Lay Love Down, Ley Love Down, with a beautiful gentleman called Ben Hawkes. And that's what we're doing at the moment. We're doing mass meditations and we're just encouraging people to get out and sing. He's written a song.
Get out and sing. Yeah.
Get out and sing. Yeah.
Indigo, I want to say hi to Susan and Mish, and Indigo's here and she's saying, how amazing, can you give us some tips to be able to see and find ley lines? Great question, Indigo.
Excellent question. So if you look at Roman roads in the UK, if they're still in natural settings, if they're, if they've still got trees and bushes around them, and a lot of these are beautifully paved. I mean, these were paved a very long time ago and they're still in really good condition. So it makes you wonder, why do we do this ridiculous thing that we do with asphalt? So you can see, as you look along the road, because the Roman roads are known to follow ley lines, there will be a perfect circle along the road in multiple places as you look at the nature. So the trees and the plants around ley lines avoid growing within them. So if you look at a ley line, it's a magnetic frequency that can be a couple of meters across, 4 or 5 meters across. But when you're standing within it, you get the cross section of it as a perfect circle in front of you. If you're looking at it from the side, you will not see it. But if you're standing within it, you can see it. So those who are not near the UK, anywhere where you go out for a walk in nature in an endemic scrub situation, so endemic meaning that humans haven't come in and bulldozed it and then put it in rows of trees. We're talking about symbiotic nature that grows naturally with all the wonderful mycelium underneath us, the telecommunication structure. As you walk around, you'll notice there'll be natural paths. There might be your main paths that the council wants you to walk on, but you'll notice that the roos or the echidnas or dingoes will use natural paths. And if you look down those natural paths, you will see these perfect circles, because plants don't want to grow within it. When a tree does grow within a ley line, it tends to grow in a very tortured looking way or a very misshapen way, because again, it's trying to avoid the ley. There's a frequency there that the trees just and plants naturally try to avoid. I do wonder if it's also a little bit about being, because plants and trees are sentient, if they're avoiding it because it's best not to grow within them, because it's an understanding within nature not to occlude those spaces, to allow the flow, the energy flow.
Isn't that
So
fascinating? That's fascinating. Go on.
So if you look in those spaces, take photographs as well, because as you're walking along the path, you're definitely walking along the ley. And if you see these perfect circles in front of you, that's a ley line. Take photographs, because sometimes it's actually much clearer on a still photograph. And look at the photographs in thumbnail form. The smaller the photograph is, the more obvious the circles will be.
Oh, wow.
A lot of people can feel the layers too before they actually get in them.
They can feel them, yeah. So Indigo says that she is in the UK. So you're up late.
Oh.
Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah.
And so she'll be looking out for these. Yeah, there's many ways, I think, that I asked that question to the guides too, and they're saying, well, for sensitive people, they can feel it. And they can feel the energy shift. And then you can ask, depending on how connected you are to your spiritual team, your guidance, you can say, is this a ley line? Or you can ask, if you're very clairvoyant, to be shown it, like you can see the land. I do this with healing with people, like show me their body as an energy grid. And so I see their body in an energy grid rather than seeing their physical body. I see it as an energy. You could say that, show me the land as an energy grid. And then you can see where the energy shifts, like where the energy is brighter or duller, or you can see it depending on how clairvoyant you are. There's many ways. A lot of people are using dowsing rods, aren't they?
Yeah.
To find energy vortices.
And there's one other thing that I like to bring up, because it's a little understood phenomena. So if you look it up, psychology calls it pareidolia. And again, I've got inverted commas there for the people who are listening. Pareidolia is supposedly a nebulous stimulus that we make up faces out of nature. So we see humanoid apparitions in nature, and that's supposed to be some sort of nebulous stimulus. It is not nebulous. It is the spirits of nature communicating with us. So when you want to communicate with somebody, and you are a plant or a tree or an elemental or a fairy, and fairies are not just little winged things, that's a sylph. There are many different versions of fairy. There are not so nice fairies that don't want us out in these natural places, that can give you a bit of a gut punch if you don't treat the place right. There are also very loving entities that want you to be there. So they will actually show you a ley line by showing a humanoid features or animal type features within the tree, within the bark, within the foliage, within a bush, in shadows on the ground. They are pointing these things out. Now, this might sound like fantasy for most people, but I have been studying this for over 12 years. When you take these photographs and you see these amazing facial apparitions, and I had an amazing experience in 2000, the same year I went up to Uluru, on the Bremer River, where an enormous tree, the dog that I was living with at the time insisted I go down to the river this particular day. It was the riverbed was dry. She walked along until she pointed at this tree. It was a very big tree. There was this massive face in the tree. And I was just dumbfounded watching this tree. It was mouthing something at me, and I couldn't understand what it was. It was this massive face in the tree, in the foliage. As the wind blew the tree, it created this, it looked like someone had projected a film onto a tree. It was so clear. And then when I realized that it had stopped speaking to me, I looked down at the dog. She wasn't pointing anymore. She turned around. She was just smiling at me. This is now station. Absolute big grin. And it was like, then she said, like, let's go. Time to go home. So I'd had the lesson. Since then, I have seen these entities communicate with me on so many occasions. I've photographed them. I share this in my course. These photographs are spectacular. They're undeniably, obviously something trying to communicate. And the percentage or the statistics of seeing these particular apparitions within a ley line goes way against chance. It's just not possible that it's not a nebulous stimulus. It's not nebulous. So some people see them in clouds. I've had the most spectacular photographs shared with me in my courses. And, you know, these course members are quite happy. Like they've said, you can use this and share it publicly. So I have done that in masterclasses and in interviews. I've shared a lot of this imagery. It's spectacular. It's nature trying to communicate with us. And if you look at so many original cultures across the world have revered these spaces. You get mountains that look like faces, and their culture there knows that it's a really specific, significant and amazingly spiritual place because of the imagery, or because the entity or the energy in that area wants itself to be seen by us. This is how we know we live in a living world that wants
a conscious universe.
It's not just the physical stuff we see around us. You know, there's otherworldly entities everywhere.
Yeah. I just want to do a station break, a station ID, and to remind people that you're listening to Accentuate the Positive Media Awakening Consciousness with Karen Swain on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. We might get into that too, how the ley lines and ETs coincide. We'll have a bit of a chat on 107.7 and 105.3 FM. And my guest today is Rachel Vaughan. And we have been talking about ley lines. We have been talking about overcoming trauma, but we've moved into ley lines. Are the fairy circles that people talk about where they see fairy, are they indications of ley lines too, like where mushrooms form circles and people talk about the fairy circles? Is that an indication that that's where ley lines are meeting, like a vortex, energy vortex?
Yes, absolutely. So, and this is where, this is where nature again is trying to communicate with us. So they'll actually, the mushrooms will actually grow within these spaces, and they'll mark out a circle for a reason. So where you get ley lines crossed, just like a ley line is a cylindrical tunnel of energy going across the Earth's surface, where they cross, they create big spheres of energy. And so the smaller lasers they cross, smaller sphere, bigger layers, bigger sphere. So if you look at Uluru is within a massive portal. I mean, it is huge. And you can sort of see around the bottom of the rock, there's a line around it. Now, obviously that's a road, but it would be clear for a reason. So in these portal spaces, nothing grows. So if you're walking along a ley line and then suddenly there's a clearing, for no apparent reason, it seems somewhat circular, you've got a portal. Then you stand within it. If you feel comfortable standing within the portal, you take a 360 of photographs and you'll be able to see where all the ley lines feed in to that particular portal space.
So how do a part of your your spiritual team, galactics, like are you talking to the galactics as well? Or I really didn't ask you about your spiritual team. You said that you were aware of spirit, but how have they identified themselves to you?
I have a team of 11 specific galactics. I don't tell people what the name that they've given me for them. It's not one of the ones that are really well known and popular. I like to keep that quiet because I like to be protective of them. So that team of 11 is actually 22, which is really interesting because they're both they're genderless. So they show themselves as also 22. So I get 11 and 22 with them. They have been with me since I was a child, and I'm one of them. So we come from the neutron star at the center of the Milky Way galaxy. So with alien apparitions or alien experiences, they also do come in through the portals in the ley lines. I know that they do also get around in ships, but one of the ways that they come into the third dimension is through the portal spaces, the bigger ones. And back onto these fairy circles with these mushrooms. So if you look at places like Stonehenge, it's in a circle for a reason. It's marking out the portal with all the ley lines crossing in there. If you look at Oracle of Delphi, there's a big spherical temple. Masonry is very difficult to make in a circle, by the way. So when you see circles in masonry, whether it's the Freemasons that have done it or ancient cultures, they're marking a portal. You see it everywhere. The Vatican courtyard actually shows the lays all going through to the monolith in the center, which is piezoelectric and has a copper top on it. And I know one of my closest friends, Max Longman, was abused in the lower levels of the Vatican. I know many people who were abused in the sub levels of the Vatican, and that is such a large portal space that the portal actually goes underground. Also, most of the portals that you'll see in nature that aren't part of a dragon line crossing, say, or a really significant line, is a sphere that just hovers just above the ground. When you get the really huge spheres, the really big portals actually go under the ground a little bit as well. So that's where you'll get your really dark rituals down the bottom of places like that. Hence the Vatican courtyard being shaped exactly.
Yeah. I think that as humans, we love to judge and say, oh, look, bad, stay away from that area because terrible things have happened in that area. But as light workers, as star seeds, light weavers, I call us light weavers. Light workers are the people that are working with the lights. They're the nurses and the people in service. But the light weavers, the magic people, are the people that are weaving a new story for planet Earth. They're taking the light and they're weaving a new story. So rather than staying away from these demonic, awful places, I think we move into those places and bring the light and transform the energy in that area. I remember watching Matteo Di Stefano going into the Vatican and doing just that, and he presented the Pope with something, I don't know, but he was guided. His guide said, go to the Vatican, follow the ley lines. He followed the ley lines all over the earth, doing ritual and taking groups with him. But he would go into these places that have been, most people wouldn't say the Vatican is a bad place. They'd say it was a holy place. But yeah, terrible things have happened in these holy places for millennia, as you say. Someone asked me years ago to come and do some earth work. And I said, that's actually not really my job. There are other people that do that. That's not my job. But on the day, I found myself getting dressed and walking down the stairs. And I'm like, where am I going? And I'm like, you're going. Got in the car, drove, rang him up, where are we going? And found myself outside a cemetery with a group of people, reconnected to an old friend who I hadn't seen for ages. And the guy who was guiding us said, don't go into the cemetery. It's really dark energy in there. Just do it around the periphery. Do your energy work around the periphery. And I thought to myself, if we're here to shift energy, then I'm going where the dark energy is. So I stormed into the cemetery. Well, my friend followed, and we did all this energy. I had no idea what I was doing, Rachel, because as I say, I don't identify myself as a ley line person, energy activator, but I guess I am, just simply by being who I am, right? And being guided. And we were both guided to do this stuff. And yeah, so it's like, go where the dark energy is being, change it, transform it, don't avoid it. Yeah. Well, what do you think about that?
Well, obviously you needed to be there because you were the one holding the highlight in that particular situation. It's another portal space. Cemeteries are also in the crossing of ley lines. So, you found yourself a portal space as well, because that's where so much grief is expressed.
Exactly, where so much grief is expressed. I suppose that you heard about the stabbings here in Bondi Junction in Sydney. There was a guy that went rampant and stabbed a whole lot of people in a big shopping centre, which was just around the corner from where I live in Sydney. So my guide said to me, go up about a week after it happened, or maybe during that week. They told me before I went, I think I took a couple of days to go. They said, go up to Bondi Junction and change the energy up there. And I said, why? Why is that up to me? They said, well, because of the media, reporting it, people are scared to go up there. It's like one person does something heinous and then they think that every day there's going to be somebody up there doing it, which is stupid, really. But they said all the shop owners are really suffering, because people are scared to go back to this area where this horrible thing happened. So I did. So I went up there and, I don't know what I'm doing. I just don't. I just asked them, what'll I do? Like, just show me what to do. But there were flowers everywhere and lots of mourning. So I just put in a lot of gratitude. I just asked, I just was very grateful for all the people that had died, even the guy that had done the killing, all the people that had bought the flowers, all the people that were mourning strangers. Just put in a whole lot of gratitude. And
beautiful.
Yeah, I'm sure that other people were guided to do the same thing. Wasn't just me. It's not like one little person can change the energy of a whole shopping centre. Or maybe I can. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe I'll find out when I'm dead. Just how powerful
we are infinitely powerful. I'm sure you made a massive difference. Gratitude is so incredibly. Gratitude's almost more powerful than love in some ways, because it can transmit.
I guess it is love. Yeah.
But you hit the nail on the head again, because a lot of these moles are also in the crossings of powerful ley lines.
Really?
Because what do you do in a mole? You hunger, you desire things. You want to be keeping up with the Joneses. You
Right.
want to buy these products. You're looking at the brand
Yeah.
names. It's all this negative influence again. And for those who
Yeah.
might be confused by how many ley lines are there, there's scarcely, according to Rory Duff, who's a geobiologist, there's scarcely a square kilometre on the face of the earth that doesn't have at least one of these ley lines in it. They are
Right.
everywhere. A
They're
lot of people live
everywhere.
in their homes and they've got ley lines crossing through, which will disrupt your sleep. The Hartman-Curry lines are negatively affecting. So it does pay to learn where they are, or you know, if you've got a disturbance in the house, you can't sleep in one particular room, get a dowser in to help you to work out what the frequencies are, because you can shift it as well.
You
Sacred
can shift
geometry is
it.
actually powerful, shifting it. Yeah.
Interesting. So how did you get into this, Rachel? How did you get into the ley line thing? Did your guides just show you when you were a kid, or was it when you were older? Because you're coping with overcoming trauma and the ritual abuse and the, you know, the whole darkness of that. And then the guides are saying, right, you've got work to do on the planet. Like, how did all that unfold?
So I think I was trained psychically under the MKUltra program from being a toddler. Before I was even verbal, I was being shown Xena cards and being asked to work out what the person in the next room that I couldn't see, which kind of card they were looking at.
Wow.
So I was used in many different ways. I was used in rituals, etc. I'm starting to wonder, I don't have any specific memories, but I'm starting to wonder if I was actually utilized as a child to locate these places. And I feel that there's probably some sense of responsibility. That's why I'm so absolutely fascinated by it now. I hope that's not the case, but it just would make sense. About 12 years ago, I felt this compulsion to get out in nature as often as I possibly could, and I would take hundreds of photographs. Then I'd go home and it would be like, you know, it'd be like the best day of my life, looking at all these beautiful photographs. And at one point I took one at Hindmarsh Falls, which is on the south coast of South Australia. Very, very interesting energies in that place. And I took a photograph of this apparition in the water that actually looked like a Mother Mary figure with a Gnostic cross in her hands in the waterfall, skull and crossbones above, all created by the water over the rocks. And then there was this, what I call the moss lady, this apparition of a female looking back at this particular waterfall with this skull and crossbones and this Mother Mary figure. That was one of the most profound experiences of my life, to see that I had captured that in that photograph. And from that point forward, I was obsessed. I would go out every time I possibly could. And then I started to notice the circles. And I couldn't work out why there were these circles everywhere. So I would go back to those particular locations where I saw the circles and I'd photograph more and more. And then my guide said, because I remember at one point, I must have actually said, what on earth is this? And my guide said, it's a ley line, or that's a convergence of ley lines, or a nexus point of ley lines. And then it all started to make sense. And you said something before about, you know, you heard, or before we came on, something about a prediction you were given roughly 10 years ago and you were waiting for it to come to fruition. This was 12 years ago, and I knew that this was going to be significant, and I had to keep taking the photographs. I just didn't know at that point who I would be sharing this information with. And now I'm doing it, you know, a lot. So
yeah. Have you got any of the photographs handy that we could screen share, or is that too hard? Maybe too hard. We should have organised that before.
Yeah, well, we can do it again.
Yeah, Rachel and I were talking before we went live about, you know, when spirit gives us things to do, or when our guides give us things to do, they never really give you a time, like when's this going to happen, or predictions. And I was saying that I got a big download about 10 years ago. And I asked when it was going to happen, and they said 2022, and it didn't happen in 2022. I've got to action it, I have to say. But, you know, having that impetus to action it, often people get ideas, inspiration, downloads, guidance to do something, and they'll go, right, I've got to do that right now. But actually receiving information and acting on it, it's two different things. Like, you can receive information. I was talking to Prageet from the Stargate Connection, the Stargate Experience, a couple of weeks ago, and he was given things 35 years ago that he's actioning now. And one of those things is going out to Uluru in October and doing some work with the portals and the ley lines out there. So yeah, so he was given that 35 years ago. You're going to go to Australia one day and you're going to work with the ley lines, and then he's been told to do it now. So often you're given information. You don't have to action it at the time you're given it. They just show you. But you feel when the time is right. So how did you know that the time was right about the ley lines harmonizing this year or at the end of this year in Uluru?
I started teaching people how to see the ley lines in 2023, end of 2023. Then I really started my course properly in July of 2024. I had no idea that the harmonisation of the ley lines was coming. No idea. So it was only when I watched Rory Duff, again, the geobiologist that I quoted earlier, and Pam Gregory on Pam's YouTube channel. So she's an astrologer. Yeah. He was speaking about it with Pam. And I don't think he's really into the whole it's a new dimension, going into the fifth dimension thing. He didn't mention that, but Pam did. She just like, whoa. She got it. And it was like, I just, my whole body just, like you said before, that levitation thing, it just, everything made sense. Why I had to bring all this information out, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, it all made sense. So that's why it's supposed to come out now. I just was getting, all of the evidence together over that 12-year period.
So what do you think the harmonizing of the ley lines, what do you think, what's the effect of that? What does that look like for us who's aware of it? Or even for people that aren't aware of it, what is the effect?
Okay. So my understanding is, and I was speaking about this recently on Jeff Mara's podcast, I actually think that color is going to be brighter. I think so we have a veil that descends when we incarnate into a physical form, where we don't necessarily remember our past lives or our soul self. From about the age of 5 onwards, that starts to sort of disappear. You see a lot of children that have imaginary friends. They're actually, they're involving themselves with an otherworldly entity, a discarnate soul. That's what an imaginary friend is. And they'll see things under the bed and in the closet. And, if they've got parents that don't believe in that sort of stuff, they'll get told that they're crazy or whatever. Poor things. So that veil descends around about the age of 5. That veil is completely disintegrating. And I think part of the veil disintegrating, so everybody's going to be able to pick up on these things very soon. Part of that is actually the color that we see. So when I went into the recovery dimension as a child, when I was having my near-death experiences, the color is so bright. The warmth from the sun there's no bite to the sun on your skin. It just feels like warmth. It's beautiful. So I feel that part of that is that colors will be brighter. We'll have a greater range of colors. So that's a big shift. That's a big thing to have as a change. Because we're coming into harmony time, it'll be more difficult, extremely difficult, in fact, for attachments to do the sort of puppeting that they do now. In fact, I think that part of the reason why we've had this crazy time in the last 4 years is because they knew hundreds of years ago that this was coming. Again, like I said before, those that have conjure up these dark things that attach to them and then tell them things audibly, they knew that this time was coming and they were going to lose their power. So this shift is part of them not being able to exist within the frequency that we're coming into. It won't be comfortable for them. A lot of the really powerful dark entities have to be underground. This is why you get a lot of underground activities, like at the Vatican and in other places, because those entities can't exist on the surface. They can only exist underground. So a lot of that will either go underground or just get you sloughed off the earth. They won't be able to exist here. And because it's harmony time, I think we'll see a lot less division, a lot less hatred, fighting. We're coming into a very powerfully positive time, in my opinion. So hence all of the desire for transhumanism and to create a different vehicle for these entities to exist within. So whether it's a clone or there's lots of different things, robot, whatever, that they're going to struggle to attach to people. So that's just some major changes that we're going to see.
Yeah, I was having a chat with someone yesterday about how many people are leaving the planet. Was it yesterday? Oh, I don't know, time. And, we see death as such a terrible thing. But as we shift in dimensional frequency on planet and what's available here, those that are choosing to have those more negative controlling experiences are leaving because their soul is choosing to continue having the lessons that the density or the trauma gives them. And as we shift, then Earth is not going to have that available as much. So they leave, young and old. And so I mean, there's so much expansion for the soul to actually go through the trauma. It's weird because as humans we say, I don't want it, but as souls we say, I'm up for that. Like, how do we reconcile the ego not wanting what the soul wants? Like, we have desire as humans. I want harmony, I want bliss, I want peace, but the soul says, I want to learn and grow. And the best way to do that is to experience the density or the contrast or the trauma that we get to experience here on Earth. So how do you think souls are going to learn and grow? This is an interesting question. As we eliminate a lot of the trauma or the density here on Earth?
I think this next phase is where we really bring out the psychic abilities. Right. So again, we're going to be more in tune with those sorts of things. What we also need to do is to make sure that people are not getting fluoride in their system anymore, because that just occludes the pineal gland. The pineal gland has little, I'm sure you know this, little quartz crystals that acts like Wi-Fi. That's how we pick up from the Akashic record. The quartz vibrates to a certain frequency and brings this information in. Fluoride actually calcifies the pineal gland. So avoid it at all costs, those who are listening and watching. Get away from fluoride toothpaste. If you mix fluoride toothpaste with biscuit ingredients and cook it up, you feed it to rats, they will die. It's a neurotoxin. Wow. It's extremely poisonous. Wow. And if it calcifies your pineal, and another thing, I've been bleating about this in every interview I do lately, the Nazis were giving fluoride to the concentration camp victims. Now, try and reconcile that. If that was for their health, why would they do that? Do you think that was concerned with their teeth? No. So, it's to suppress psychic abilities, because if you've got a psychic person in one of those gulags and they know when the guard's coming, or if there's a weakness in a guard's sensory abilities, they become a superpower. They've got super gifts. So they didn't want them to have that, and it also makes people very docile. So we won't have those sorts of things coming in. The food that we're going to eat is going to be a lot cleaner, because it's not going to be full of pesticides and things. It's just the shift this paradigm shift is pretty major. So I think we're going to see more people working on their psychic gifts, the psychic abilities, things like telekinesis. It's not unusual to be able to move things with the mind. All you have to do is look on YouTube and look up telekinesis flywheel, FLY wheel. I know my accent can be quite strong. On YouTube, and you will get hundreds of videos on people moving a flywheel, which is just a disc of paper or alfoil on a pin with their etheric energy from the aura. So that's a form of telekinesis. So that sort of thing is going to become, so we'll still be doing our lessons, we'll just be heightening our abilities.
Yeah. So instead of overcoming trauma, as we've discussed on the show today, we'll be expanding consciousness. And that is a full-time, I'm not overcoming any trauma, haven't been overcoming trauma for many years. But the expansion of consciousness and psychic abilities, and there's desires, because I've spoken to people on the show that do amazing things, and have this, like Preston Dennett wows me. He's a conscious astral traveler, which means that he remembers his nightly excursions, like he literally falls asleep in his physical body and wakes up in his astral body, and he says inevitably there's some lost soul in his house, like, where am I? They've died. Where am I? And he's like, let me show you. I'll take you to another place where. And so he's like moving people across who are still sort of lost after they've died. Maybe they've died in dementia, or maybe they've died in old age or whatever, and they're confused. But he has full memory of that when he comes back. So he remembers his spiritual adventures as well as his physical adventures. And I think to myself, amazing. Another person, Kevin Briggs, is the same. And it makes me think that we think we have to die in order to have these spiritual experiences, like experiences on other dimensions, other planets, other dimensions, the spirit world, heaven, whatever you want to call it. But actually, if we do awaken while we are physically incarnated, we get the benefit of having all those experiences and the physical experience. So it's an add-on. It's like it's an add-on to the experiences when we were. So yeah, that's a full-time job, having that expansion or that awakening. Yeah, so that's what we'll be doing, rather than overcoming trauma as we've done for so long, and the whole, needing to forgive people and all that sort of thing. I mean, there's a lot more of that to come here on planet Earth. God, there's heaps of it. But as we shift into another experience, we'll be just ever expanding and expanding and expanding our consciousness connections. Yeah, it's exciting times. All right, we've got about 10 minutes to go. Are you going to be showing people ley lines? You're going to be taking people on little treks out at Uluru in December, the Cosmic Consciousness Conference?
I certainly hope so. It's not been planned, so I'm not a tour guide as such, but I'm sure we'll be going out for walks, and I'll be seeing. What I'm really curious to know is whether or not the smaller ley lines show themselves within that massive crossing portal space. That's not something I've been able to. I wasn't aware of this as much, well, hardly at all when I went to Uluru in 2000. So I'm definitely going to be taking my camera out and making sure I get a lot of photographs, because I'm hoping that I'll see a bunch of smaller layers all coming into that portal space, which would be fantastic. But that's part of my presentation. Will center around the layers and how to find them, and the visual aspects, and obviously the scientific proof that we can see, as well as talking about how to read auras. One thing with looking for ley lines, if you use a relaxed vision technique, which is what Father of Brilliant Photography Walter Kilner described, if you let your eyes relax, you can see different aspects of the electromagnetic spectrum that you can't see when you're focused. Same as when you read aura. So I'll be sharing some of those techniques as well. Basically, everything that I teach in my course will pretty much is what Catherine and I discussed. I'll be presenting. So looking forward to that, and I'm just looking forward to listening to everybody else as well.
Yeah, a lot of stuff has happened since 2000 out there. A few years ago, the Australian government handed back that whole area to the original people, who have been jumping up and down for years saying it's a sacred space, it's a sacred space, don't bring your tourists to walk all over. Anyway, the tourists still come and the money still flows from the tourist industry, but the original people control it all now, and all the money goes into their community. And I have to say, I went out there a couple of years ago. I avoided going out to the desert because I'm such a water baby. I just love being on the coast. But a girlfriend said, come on, we're going. So I went, and but there was a peace out there I didn't expect. But for the longest time, I heard about the unrest between the white man and the black man and the governments and the community. And that's all changed now. Like there's a peace. It's really peaceful. I felt like a real peace. There's still dissension. There's still people complaining about stuff. There's always someone complaining about something. But I felt so at home out there. And they say that Uluru is a piece of the Pleiades that was slammed into Mother Gaia, Mother Earth, way back during the creation story, that really activated the consciousness of Mother Gaia, like seeded life into Gaia. Somebody said, I discussed this on a show we had years ago, and somebody in the comments said sort of like the sperm enters the ovum. And I thought, what a great image, like this piece, this big, huge rock. It wasn't a round rock. It was like a spear that slammed into Gaia. And what we see is just the tip of it, which is this massive rock called Uluru. And but the most of it's actually deep down into the earth. And so and it pulses with a frequency that came from the Pleiades. So the original people talk about the seven sisters of the Pleiades, or the six sisters. They draw it all the time. Their art depicts looking down at Earth from space. Yeah, it's amazing. But yeah, it's beautiful. So you haven't been back since 2000?
No. Yeah. Like I said, I really wanted to go in June of this year, but it didn't work out. And then Catherine contacted me. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, they've been doing great work, Catherine and Mick out there. So they're going to come on the show in a couple of weeks, and maybe if anyone is listening to this that's on the other side of the world and you've always thought about going to Australia and you're into these cosmic conscious conversations, you might want to go and join one in Uluru. So come and come to Australia and see the centre of Australia. I have to say the centre of Australia is very different to the coast. So don't think that if you go just to Uluru that this is what Australia is all about. It's very different than the coast, but it is a beautiful place on the planet. Come and do a tour down under and meet some beautiful conscious people at the Cosmic Conscious Conference. There's so many great conferences happening in Australia at the moment. It's so cool. And Rachel will be one of the speakers. Learn about ley lines, speak to the rock. I spoke to the rock. She's beautiful. She's absolutely beautiful. She talks. Did you speak to it in 2000? Did you speak to the rock when you were out there in 2000?
I was so overawed. I did not speak to the rock. I was just listening.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That there was like that silence on top of the rock. You can still see that path where they used to take people up on a rock. It's a well-worn path. They've fenced it off now, so you can't get up there. And there's lots of rules and regulations. The original people out there say that you can't do this in this area and you can't do that in that area. They've got their rules and regulations. And I spoke to her about all those rules and regulations because, there's an idea that the original people, all of the original peoples of Earth, the indigenous original peoples, the Indians and the what we call Aboriginal. Stephen Strong told me not to call them Aboriginal because ab means not, like abnormal, not original.
Yes.
So I call them original people. Are all like much more conscious than us fleshy white people. But I think that that's actually changing. They do have their puzzle piece in the consciousness expansion, but they also have their cultural ideas, which are not necessarily expansive. They can still limit you. So I spoke to the rock about that. I said, tell me about all these rules and regulations that they have. And they said, well, that's their culture. It's not necessarily spiritual, like guidance. It's just their culture, like any culture. The Italian culture, the Greek culture, Asian culture, they all have their ideas of what's right and wrong, but that's just culture, not necessarily spiritual law, LORE. And I said, okay, so you've got to differentiate between what is spiritual law and culture. Yeah. So any last things you'd like to say to us before we go?
Oh, well, just thank you for having me on. And yeah, if people want to go out to the conference, it's I can't imagine a more significant time to be in a crossing of ley lines like Uluru. Again, we're coming into permanent harmony time, to be in one of a crossing of dragon lines. So dragon lines, there were only 6 pairs up to 2012. In 2017, a new dragon line appeared. Another one appeared in 2018 and another one in 2019. That was the beginning of this massive awakening period. So that is, the earth is waking us up too. So imagine being in one of those rare spaces where 2 of these lines cross. There's only 7 points on the earth where the dragon lines cross. So this is a significant space. Imagine being there at this time, at the point of the harmonization, the permanent harmonization, as we come into this amazing, beautiful time, this new paradigm on earth.
Yeah.
I mean, what more incentive could you possibly have?
Absolutely. And if you are interested in going, there is a link under this, wherever you're listening to this, either on audio or visual. There's a link on YouTube or Facebook or any of the platforms you're listening that you can get a $50 discount if you put in the promo code Karen, all capital letters. And also, Rachel, if you click see more here, you'll go to my website, which will give you all Rachel's links. You've got a YouTube channel, a Rumble channel, a BitChute, Twitter. You've got the Leyline Movement, leylinesdownunder.com. You've got the sixthscience.com, which is your website. So yeah, website. all those links will be on the link that says see more here if you want to find out more about Rachel. It's been such a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been beautiful. Thanks, Rachel.
Karen. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
And thanks everyone that's been tuning in. You've all been very quiet on the chat today. Normally there's a lot more chat. Indigo was there, and Diane, Mish, and Susan. Thanks for your comments. New comment here. And Patricia, thanks, ladies. Thanks so much. Yeah. Let me know if you go. Great show. Rebecca, Rebecca Wellfriend. Hi. Let me know if you go out there, and we will catch you next time on the show. Who have I got coming up? I think Adam Apollo is coming up next week. Hopefully we can get him on. I booked him months ago. He's a busy dude. He's fantastic, galactic guy. But thanks again, Rachel, for coming on the show. Big love to you.
Big love, darling. Thank you.
Bye for now.